and welcome to another episode of A Rockstar Take On. And this time we're going to do a video on legacy. So, what is a rockstar take on legacy? Well, I feel I have so much context to explain before we can start. Like, what's a legacy? What's a rockstar? And yeah, so, well, just let's start. Legacy. Legacy is, in general, thought of what you leave behind after you're dead. So, which is a very interesting term because I think most people do not have thoughts about what their legacy is going to be. And you could even say that wanting to have a legacy is kind of like the hallmark of either an artist or the hallmark of someone who has built something in a very intentional way. So one of the ways that I have used, I don't think I've used it on this channel, but I've used it in other channels or in blogs. I don't know. I'm going to repeat it here. Is that society has three different types of people: the builders, the nurturers, and the creatives. And the builders and the nurturers go very well together. It's kind of like a yin and yang thing where obviously the other has to have a little piece of its opposite in them. So a builder who has no concept of what it is to nurture will not fit into that society or union. But a nurturer who doesn't have any concept of what the builder does is also not fitting into that union. So the majority of society is a union between nurturers and builders, where one has a larger or smaller part inside of themselves of the other. So that is kind of like what I have called on this channel core culture. So our core culture, the thing that keeps the world in a sustainable place for people to live, is a union between the builders and the nurturers, or the building identity inside of yourself and the nurturer identity inside of yourself. You can also see it as like an internal process. But the creators are a whole different ball game, and I have talked about this in terms of them being part of the outer rim. So they're outside of society. They're like a galaxy that is, or they're part of the same galaxy, but not the same planet. So, the planet would be core culture, and the outer rim would be around that planet, or somewhere far away. So the creators, or the people in the outer rim, they are not part of core culture. They're not bound to the builders and to the nurturers of our world. But depending on the culture that the builders and the nurturers create together, the people in the outer room will have better or non-existent relationships to them. So if you have a very authoritarian core culture, then it means that creativity is expressed. It means that individual thinking is repressed, and that there will be there will not be the seeking contact with people from the outer rim, or the other cultures or whatever, is repressed, is discouraged, um, or even forbidden. So the in like a natural, healthy core culture, which then consists of builders and of nurturers, um, there will be a lot of interaction with people from the outer rim, with the creatives, with the artists, with the scientists, with people who think in a different way. But the more authoritarian and repressed the core culture is of these nurturers and builders, um, um, the more they are repressed into an authoritarian system, the less there will be connection, and the more the people in the outer rim of the people who think in a different way or who are creative will be seen as the enemy. So to think of a legacy, what do you want to leave behind? I think you would either sort that within the builders, because they built things that are meant to last, or that are visible. Or it is, thinking of legacy is about the people in the outer rim. But the people in the outer rim, the creatives, who are they going to leave their legacy to? Because they're not connected to the people in the core culture, not by definition. So in a way, it is a opposition of is it an opposition? Is that, I don't know, contradiction, to be creative and to at the same time think about your legacy. Because if you're in the outer rim, if you're creative, then even if you have a lot of other creatives that you hang out with, and that you those are not your audience. Those are not the people who you are creating your legacy for. So then who are you creating your legacy for, if by definition your work is going to be at the mercy of what core culture is at the moment, if it's en vogue or if it's forbidden? So to think about your legacy from a creative point of view is always kind of like relative, or it's always, it has a lot of uncertainty, because you're dependent on a core culture that will also exist after you die, that you will not know. So like if the core culture is very open, then maybe your progressive work will land really well with them, and they will nurture every word you ever said. But if the culture that comes after you is very repressive, then and maybe your work is no longer relevant there. So so it's always a little bit of a I would say, don't put all your like your whole thing about who you are as an artist. Don't put it all into the basket of after I die, because it's just so much uncertainty. So don't put all of your things in the basket of legacy. But it is a very interesting idea to think about, like, what do you want to leave behind? And it can even be that you don't want to leave anything behind, like that your art is that after you die, every proof of who you were and your work will be erased. I mean, so the legacy could be that there is no legacy, that you're like a, I don't know, like a ghost. Or the legacy can be that there's only the finished things that you leave behind. That everything, like your sketchbooks, your all your correspondence, all your notebooks, all your, you know, the content of your phone, everything has to be deleted. That after you die, the the kind of the way you came to your art, whatever that is kind of like bound by law, or that you have like a I don't know how you call it, like a document or something that really says that it has to be erased. So you can also do like a partial erasing. You can erase partial your work. So that's also an option, that you say, no, I want to have control over which part of my work is canon. What is not canon, and like everything that I haven't finished, you know, has to be destroyed. So that's an option. And then there's the option that you say, I want everything to be at least considered, or I want everything to be part of my legacy. I don't want anything to be thrown out, because like the decision about what is art, or what is the most relevant about what I created, is cannot be made, and will even be different depending on the time. So we'll give you an example of ANAIS NIN, the 20th century diarist. And she tried to be like a regular author. She was one of the first self-published authors, because she bought a book prize. I think this was in the 50s, if I'm correct. So she even published her own books at some point. And in the late 60s, she, no, not the late 60s. By the time she was 52, 67, 57. I think early 50s. By the early 50s, 1950s, she considered herself a flawed author. And then she began to realize that it was a diary that she had kept her whole life that would be her biggest legacy. So if she had been someone who had by then thrown her diaries out because it was not serious diary or not serious work, and she wanted to be a novelist, then she wouldn't have had that. So she started working on her diary, and she published Henry and June, and other diaries as well. And then in the 70s, and that's when she became known also as a writer about women's issues, women's rights issues, political issues, but from a very personal perspective. And then in the 70s, around the time of her death, or in the final years before her death, she was working on publishing her erotica, which was one of the first things she ever wrote, and definitely one of the first thing that she wrote she got paid for, was that she wrote erotica for a collector in the 1930s, I believe it was. So she was in the 1970s, in the final decade of her life, or the final 5 years of her life, she started, or was convinced by her publisher to start publishing her erotic work. And that is what most people will know her from. So even that idea that she had in the early 1950s, oh, but it's the diary. It's the diary that's really my legacy. Was kind of like, it came with a little twist of in the 1970s where her publisher was like, but what's that erotica that you wrote in the 1930s? And she was like, oh, that's just commercial work. It was like, doesn't have my soul in it. I had to write in a way that pleased the collector, and it's not really me. And then they dug into these stories and they were like, oh, they're to date the best erotica ever written. So that just really shows that initially she thought it was her novels, then she thought it was her diary, and then it really became this erotica that really stood out, and that most people know from her. It's usually the first thing people read. So that it really makes a case for making sure that you collect everything that you create, and because you don't know which will be the relevant part, and that could even change as society changes. So that is another way of looking at it. That's really like a strong case to really collect everything that you create, because you do not know what is the most relevant part. And then there is another way to look at legacy, and that is to really make that decision. If you think that curating your legacy, or that even getting your head around the idea of a legacy, if that is your creative work, because it comes with a lot of, like, it's a lot of work. Once you start, once you say, yes, this is my work, I want to be an artist, or like a working artist in whatever industry that you are in, who has put thought in what comes after me. But you can also say, no, that is so much time and headspace that's going to keep me from my current work, that's going to keep me from my current connection with the people who are alive today, and I am alive today. And my work, therefore, as a working artist, is to be in connection with the work that needs to be created today, and to be available for my connection to my audience, like what they are thinking about what I write or what I create. That is the work of a living, working artist. And the curation aspect and the looking back aspect is the work of a dead artist. That is what people can still do after I am no longer here. And therefore, it can never be my purpose as a living working artist to curate that, because I cannot have the same job as a dead writer or a dead artist or a dead in whatever area that you work. So there's also, you can make a really strong case for that. As long as you breathe, you do not have to invest or think about your legacy, because the legacy will still be there when you're dead and you're still alive. So your work is to live and create and do your artistic work now. And when you're dead, the legacy will still be there. So those are my thoughts on a rockstar take on legacy. And next time we're going to do another rockstar take on belonging. So see you then. Bye bye.